My brother, a top-tier Omega, had his feelings deceived by a rotten scummy alpha. After I found him, I released my pheromones without hesitation. Crushed by Enigma pheromones, he curled in on himself in unbearable agony. I forced him to look at me and demanded, "Do you understand how Omegas feel now? Will you still dare to do it again?" The strikingly handsome alpha's face was flushed red, tears smeared across it. His lips moved, and in a hoarse voice he said, "Good." "Good?" I laughed softly. "Good what? Good because it hurts?" I sneered. "You brought this on yourself, didn't you?" His eyes were unfocused, his voice so hoarse it barely came out, yet he still struggled to finish the sentence. "Good. It feels good." The moment I stepped inside, I saw my parents standing together outside Danny's room. They were sighing nonstop, their faces full of worry. "Mom, Dad," I called out. "What happened to my brother?" They exchanged a glance. "He seems to have been wronged somehow. He's locked himself in his room since yesterday and won't come out." My father's face flushed red with anger. "It must be that awful alpha bullying him." The bedroom door was shut tight. Faint traces of sorrow-tinged pheromones seeped through the crack beneath it. My brother was the only Omega in our family. He'd been cherished and protected since the day he was born. When he told us he'd met an alpha who really suited his tastes, the whole family panicked. We were terrified he'd be deceived. Danny brushed it off, saying we were making a big deal out of nothing. But the very thing we'd feared most still happened. I clenched my back teeth and ground them together. That alpha's name was Adrien, wasn't it? The bar was deafening, lights flashing in a dizzy blur. All kinds of pheromones mixed in the air, thick and overwhelming, enough to make anyone lightheaded. I restrained my own pheromones, pressing a finger to the bridge of my nose as I frowned and pushed deeper inside. At the bar, I finally saw the man Danny had mentioned. Adrien stood tall, his looks and physique striking enough to stand out immediately from the crowd. He was leaning against the bar. Several Omegas gathered around him, laughing and flirting as if nothing were wrong. My fist clenched tightly at my side. Suppressing the urge to punch him straight in the face, I walked over to Adrien. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. He stepped out from the group of Omegas and moved closer to me on his own initiative. "A beta?" Adrien leaned in slightly, sniffing. He was dressed casually, his collar loose and wide open. From this angle, the rise and dip of his physique were clearly on display. No matter how I looked at him, he seemed like the type who drifted through life, reckless, unserious, the kind of guy with no fixed place to belong. I studied him for a moment before responding with a low, flat sound. "You're handsome," Adrien said easily, never sparing his compliments. "This drink's on me?" I didn't bother refusing. "Thanks." While I was sizing him up, Adrien was doing the same to me. "How tall are you?" 193. "Damn," he laughed. "First time I've met a beta taller than me." "It's pretty late," I said casually, testing him. "Don't you need to go back and keep your partner company?" "If I had someone," Adrien said, sounding a little drunk now, his tone drifting, "why would I be here?" "I see." I nodded, then pulled out my cigarette case and tipped it toward him. "Want to step outside and have one?" "Sure." Adrien didn't seem guarded at all. He followed me out through the back door into the alley, so unalert that he didn't even dodge when I casually draped an arm over his shoulder. "Got any plans later?" I asked. "Want to go to a hotel?" Adrien choked, sobering up instantly. "Huh?" He stumbled over his words. "Isn't this a little fast?" "Fast?" "Yeah. No matter how impatient you are, shouldn't you at least get to know each other first?" "Is that so?" Adrien finally sensed something was wrong and started backing away. I grabbed his collar with one hand and yanked him straight back. "Then why didn't you think it was too fast when you were bullying an Omega?" "Wait, what are you talking about?" His smile froze. "Isn't there some kind of misunderstanding here?" He tried to pry my hand off, but no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free. Since when did betas get this strong? Watching the panic slowly creep across his face, I couldn't help but laugh. A powerful, choking wave of pheromones burst out, instantly engulfing Adrien. "Sorry," I said lightly. "I'm not a beta. I'm an Enigma. An Enigma who can mark alphas." "Enigma?" The room was sealed and locked, and I released my pheromones without restraint. In just a few seconds, the dense scent filled the entire space. Adrien covered his mouth and nose, his expression turning ugly, clearly repulsed by the smell. He released his own pheromones, trying to push back against the pressure. But it didn't take long before he was completely overwhelmed. Even his glands began to throb with pain under the crushing force. Clutching at his glands, Adrien tried to escape the room. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted. "Get out of the way! Stop blocking me!" He kept pounding and shoving at me as I stood in front of the door, but before long he couldn't muster any strength at all. The pain caused by the overwhelming pheromones faded, replaced by an unfamiliar numbness that spread through his body, leaving his legs trembling. Adrien raised his arm and threw a punch at me, but his fist had gone soft and weak. There was no strength behind it at all. He staggered back a couple of steps, his balance faltering. Leaning against the wall, he tried to put as much distance between us as possible. I stepped forward. 2 strides were enough to catch up. I threw Adrien onto the bed. The mattress was soft, and his body bounced twice before sinking into it. He tried to push himself up, only to realize his limbs refused to respond. Pheromones far stronger than an alpha's continued to invade his body, and his thoughts slowly began to blur. Cold sweat broke out across Adrien's back as panic set in. He desperately ran through everyone he'd interacted with recently. They were all harmless, sweet omegas. He hadn't crossed paths with anyone this terrifying, had he? But whether he remembered it or not, whether he'd done anything wrong or not, the situation in front of him made one thing painfully clear. He was in trouble. Serious trouble. Adrien lifted his head, trying to make one last argument. I stepped forward and slammed my hand down on the back of his neck, forcing his face back into the bedding. His voice was completely muffled, reduced to broken, indistinct sounds. "Don't you like playing games?" I said. "I increased the concentration of my pheromones. Then today, I'll play with you properly. Enigmas are a rare 4th gender. Our pheromones are even more powerful than an alpha's, strong enough to resist the effects of an omega's heat. But at the same time, we're far more prone to losing control. Since the year I differentiated, I've spent every single day suppressing my pheromones. Up until now, this was the first time I'd ever released them at such a concentration." Adrien lay limp on the bed, his clothes pulled taut by his movements, fully outlining the lines of his muscles. True to his status as an alpha, broad shoulders, narrow waist, long legs, evenly distributed muscle, all coiled with tension. What a waste on a piece of trash. My gaze lingered over him. His muffled whimpers didn't stop, and the pheromones he'd been using to resist finally weakened, leaving only a faint trace drifting in the air. Adrien looked like a fish drowning on land, gulping desperately for breath. His mind was foggy, as if he might drown in my pheromones at any moment. But as the crushing pressure intensified, something else began to surface. His body jerked violently, then curled up on the bed, frozen in place. A few seconds later, his gaze drifted toward the source of that strange sensation. The bed sheets were soaked, a clearly visible dark stain spreading across them. Adrien froze. But before he could fully process it, the pheromones dragged him back into that overwhelming rush. I pulled over a chair and sat down against the wall, watching coldly as Adrien struggled in misery. From this angle, everything happening on the bed was laid bare. Every shift in his expression, every tremor, every labored breath. I could see it all perfectly clearly. At this concentration, an Enigma's pheromones won't cause any real physical harm to an alpha like Adrien, but they will keep his glands under constant pressure, triggering pain and all kinds of distressing reactions. Compared to using my fists, I prefer dealing with him this way. Clean. Efficient. At some point, Adrien's pheromones drifted toward me. There was no aggression in them at all, soft and weak, curling around my ankle. I scoffed. To think he still dared to provoke me at a time like this. I increased the concentration of my pheromones, flooding them straight at Adrien. At first, he resisted fiercely, but as the seconds dragged on, his movements grew smaller and smaller, until he could only curl up on the bed, rubbing weakly against the sheets, his voice completely hoarse. "How is it?" I asked. "Do you understand how omegas feel now? Being suppressed by pheromones, do you finally get it? Will you still dare to do it again?" Adrien didn't answer. "Hey, I'm talking to you, scum," I called out again. Only then did Adrien react. He slowly turned over and lifted his face toward me. His cheeks were flushed red, tears smeared messily across his face. His lips moved, and he forced out a word in a rough, broken voice. "Good." "Good?" I laughed softly. "Good what? Good because it hurts?" I sneered. "You brought this on yourself, didn't you? Why don't you think about how miserable all those omegas you tricked must have felt?" Adrien's eyes were unfocused. His voice was so hoarse it barely sounded human, but he still struggled to finish the sentence. "Good. It feels good." Adrien's body went limp again and again. completely submerged in that sensation, unable to pull himself out. Watching him like that only made my temper worsen. I pressed down on him with even harsher pheromones. The pheromones lingering around me didn't disperse. That faint, pleasant scent curled at my side, dragging me back from the edge of losing control. Realizing they belonged to Adrien, I let out a cold snort. I loosened the pressure on him and stepped forward, biting down on the gland at the back of his neck from behind. A surge of pheromones flooded in, violently invading Adrien's gland. I left a temporary mark on him. A temporary mark wouldn't last long, but it was enough to keep him in line for a while. He trembled, his voice breaking, tears forced from his eyes once again. I turned on the purifier. The pheromone concentration in the room dropped rapidly. Gradually, Adrien regained his clarity. He sat up on the bed, the corners of his eyes red, 2 tears still clinging there. His face was blank, almost dazed. After being tossed around on the bed like that, his clothes were a complete mess. But the most impossible thing to ignore was the darkened fabric of his pants. Adrien himself didn't seem to notice. He just sat there, stunned, staring into space. I looked at him with clear disgust. "If I ever catch you tricking an Omega again," I said coldly, "I'll kill you." Adrien's body shuddered. "Do you remember Danny? He liked you that much, and you still abandoned him." I pulled the empty cigarette case from my pocket and threw it at his head. "Get as far away as possible. Don't ever let me see you going near him again. Do you hear me?" His head tilted to the side, hair flying from the impact. Only then did Adrien seem to come back to himself. He looked at me, his brows knitting slightly. "Abandoned?" he repeated. "What, are you still trying to argue?" Adrien shook his head. "But we never dated." I rushed home in a panic. Danny was in his bedroom playing games, long fingers flying over the controller. The room was dim, still carrying a faint trace of heat-scented pheromones. "That's not what I said at all," he went on. "Mom and Dad misunderstood again. Adrien just happens to be my type, so I confessed to him, and even suggested we take things a step further. He didn't even think about it before rejecting me. Said things were moving too fast and he couldn't accept it. I was close to my heat those days, so yeah, I was a little impulsive. But you know me, Marcus," he added smugly. "Your brother here is such a charming Omega. When have I ever been rejected before?" Of course I felt crushed. That's why I hid in my room. I was completely stunned, my mind going blank for a moment. I pinched the bridge of my nose and let out a long sigh. Danny glanced over. "Mom and Dad said you went to see him last night? You didn't do anything bad, did you? Like threatening him or something?" Images from the night before, me relentlessly suppressing someone with pheromones, flashed through my mind, and cold sweat broke out instantly. "How could I, bro?" I said stiffly. "What kind of era do you think we're living in now?" "Good." Danny relaxed and turned his attention back to the game. "That alpha's actually pretty cute. Kind of simple-minded. Way better than those alphas full of nonsense and toxic alpha supremacy." I had absolutely nothing to say. I asked Danny for the address of Adrien's company. The next day at noon, I showed up right on time. The office was quiet. I spotted Adrien at a glance. He was discussing work with a colleague. Sensing my gaze, Adrien glanced in my direction. That single look made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Thankfully, he looked away quickly and returned his attention to the documents in front of him. I began observing him in secret. He was dressed in formal office attire, completely different from how he'd looked at the bar. The Adrien at the bar had been relaxed, a little careless, almost roguish. The Adrien at work, however, was sharp and capable. The silver-framed glasses perched on his nose gave his face an added cool, restrained air. I raised a hand and pressed lightly against my itching gland. Only after he finished dealing with his work did Adrien walk over to me. The temporary mark on him hadn't faded yet. My pheromones still clung to him from head to toe, so much so that even pheromone perfume couldn't fully mask it. Yet Adrien didn't seem affected by it at all. "You were looking for me?" he asked. "Yeah." After that brief exchange, silence fell between us. To break the awkwardness, I spoke first. "I didn't expect you to actually have a job." Adrien looked at me. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" He glanced at his watch, then led me to an empty conference room. "So," he said, "what is it?" Talking to Adrien like this, so distant and businesslike, made me tense without realizing it. "I misunderstood what happened that day," I said. "I came to apologize." "I'm sorry. I didn't bother to find out the full story first, and I ended up hurting you. I'll make it up to you." Adrien's expression remained calm. Through the lenses of his glasses, his gaze stayed fixed on me, unblinking. I continued, pushing myself to finish. What do you want? Money? A watch? A car? A house? Instead of answering, Adrien asked, Do you have someone you're dating? No. Anyone you're about to start dating? No. Someone you like? No. Adrien questioned me one by one. After receiving nothing but negative answers, he nodded in apparent satisfaction. Then let's try it, he said. I froze. Are you insane? Adrien frowned slightly. Didn't you say anything was fine? You're an Enigma, right? You're the first one I've ever met. I felt really good that day. Our pheromones are very compatible. So, he said calmly, I want to try being with you. I didn't listen to Adrien any further. I simply transferred a sum of money directly to his card. But by evening, that money was returned to me, in cash. Adrien stood at my door, a duffel bag stuffed with bills hanging from his hand. His greeting was casual, almost lazy. Hey! He somehow found my room and sat down in a chair like he'd been here 100 times already. Rubbing my temples, I felt a headache coming on. How did you find this place? Danny told me. My brother? Adrien's tone was relaxed. He also said that if you tried to kick me out, I should call him. I choked, swallowing all the words I'd been about to say. Adrien leaned back against the cushion like he was in his own home. His glasses dangled loosely from his fingers as he idly swung them back and forth, occasionally reaching out to grab a piece of fruit from the plate on the table. A few buttons of his neatly fastened shirt had been undone at some point, leaving his collarbones exposed to the air. Adrien's pheromones spread quietly through the room, drifting close, then pulling away, lingering around me without fully closing in. With an infuriatingly smug expression, he brushed his pheromones against the inside of my wrist. By the time I noticed, he'd already withdrawn them at lightning speed, then looked up at me with an innocent smile as if nothing had happened. What else did you say to my brother? I asked. Just what happened that day. All of it, Adrien nodded, then shook his head. I also told him I like you, and that I want to pursue you. The headache I'd just managed to ease came crashing back in full force. What did my brother say? Danny said he wished me luck, Adrien replied, and told you to take good care of me. Sensing my displeasure, Adrien wisely tried to placate me with his pheromones. They approached me carefully, circling once around my body. He restrained the innate pressure and aggression typical of an alpha's pheromones, leaving behind only a light, pleasant scent that slowly spread through the room. I'd smelled plenty of alpha pheromones before. Most of them were sharp and irritating, carrying an uncomfortable sense of intrusion. They didn't really affect an Enigma, but I'd never liked them much. Compared to those, Adrien's pheromones were gentle and calm, far more pleasant to breathe in. My fingers twitched at my side. Instinctively, I stepped back, increasing the distance between us. Heat spread through my body, and the moment I caught his scent, my throat tightened. These were signs of entering a sensitive phase. As a fourth gender, I was rarely affected by other people's pheromones. Even if an Omega in heat stood right in front of me, I could remain perfectly composed and escort them straight to the hospital. This was the first time. The first time I'd almost been pushed into a sensitive phase by someone's pheromones alone. Put your pheromones away. Adrien looked a little disappointed. Do you hate my pheromones that much? I ignored him. Wait here. I'm going out to make a couple of dishes. With that, I fled the room as if escaping. Adrien sat at the dining table waiting to eat while I went all out in the kitchen, the spatula practically flying in my hand. When he saw the plates of meat being set down one by one, his eyes lit up. After saying thank you, Adrien wasted no time and dug right in. His table manners were terrible. Before he'd even eaten much, oil stains had already splattered onto his once spotless white shirt. I frowned repeatedly as I watched. No one's fighting you for it, I said. Can't you wipe your mouth? There's tissue right here. I'll wipe after I'm done. Watching him eat like this, my brow never once relaxed. How was he such a clean, capable person at work, yet turned into an idiot the moment he got off? Adrien clearly knew he'd made a mess. After finishing his meal, he took the initiative to help clear the table. As he moved around, I caught sight of the deep bite mark imprinted on his gland. Hey, I called out. Just leave that there. Come here. I'll put some medicine on it. Adrien obediently followed behind me, exposing his vulnerable gland without hesitation. The bite mark was red and scabbed over. An Enigma's pheromones overlaid the alpha's original scent, slowly seeping outward. Once I got closer, the alpha pheromones became more noticeable. My Adam's apple bobbed, my canines itching faintly. I ran my tongue over them, forcing down the urge to lower my head and breathe him in deeply, then rummaged through the medicine kit for a cotton ball. I dabbed it with iodine and pressed it against the wound. The sting made Adrien flinch. He shifted forward slightly, only for me to grab him and pull him back. "Sorry." Adrien shook his head. Then he looked at me, and suddenly reached out. My entire body froze. His hand didn't stop. Like he'd developed a sudden obsession, he squeezed and rubbed, over and over. I ground my teeth. Any guilt I'd felt a moment ago vanished completely. "What do you think you're doing?" Adrien smiled innocently. "I'm just seeing what the difference is between an Enigma and an Alpha." He seemed to be taking his time feeling it out. "Feels like you're stronger than me? Guess that's the fourth gender for you. Not only are your pheromones stronger than an Alpha's, you're also built like this. Just don't know if it's all looks and no substance." I could He didn't get to finish. A vein jumped at my temple. I barely restrained the urge to punch him straight in the face. "Adrien, are you looking to—" Before I could finish, Adrien cut me off. "Yeah," he said calmly. "Exactly what you're thinking." I shut my mouth. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get Adrien to leave. He acted like he'd grown roots in my place, clinging to the leg of the table and refusing to let go. "Didn't you say you'd compensate me?" he said. "I've already decided what I want." My eyelid twitched with anger, my pheromones starting to stir restlessly. "Say it. I want you to pick me up and drop me off every day, and sometimes eat meals with me. I don't have time to play games with you." "I'm not playing," he said seriously. He raised a finger and waved it in front of me. 1 month, just 1 month. If after that you still don't feel anything for me, I'll stop bothering you completely." He sounded half joking, but there was a trace of sincerity in his eyes. For a moment, I couldn't tell whether Adrien was messing with me or being serious. I didn't feel like dragging this out any longer. I answered casually, "Fine, then it's settled." From that day on, I started picking Adrien up and driving him to and from work. He lived in the neighboring complex, and his company was along the same route as mine, so it didn't really take up much extra time. But as time went on, I slowly realized something. Adrien was only pretending to be human. He looked clean and presentable on the outside, but his place was a complete disaster. He talked non-stop nonsense all day long. No matter whether it was black or white, when it came out of his mouth, it somehow turned yellow. So shameless it made me want to punch him. More than once, I'd had the urge to teach him another lesson with my pheromones, just like last time. I hauled Adrien off the bed and dumped him straight into the mountain of clothes piled beside it. "Change your clothes already," I snapped. "Do you know you've only got an hour before work?" Adrien opened his eyes and sluggishly fished around in the clothes pile for what he planned to wear today. Looking at the overflowing trash can and the messy bed, my temple throbbed. "What are you, part cockroach or something?" I started cleaning up Adrien's room. The moment I lifted the blanket, his pheromones rushed straight at me. My gland throbbed painfully, and an inexplicable surge of impulse rose up inside me. Ever since the time I'd fully released my pheromones, controlling them had become much harder. Especially when it came to Adrien. That sensation was even stronger. By the time I finished tidying up and turned around, Adrien already had his bag in hand and was ready to head downstairs. His eyes were half-lidded, still looking sleepy. The buttons on the front of his shirt were fastened all wrong, crooked, several of them mismatched. Adrien didn't notice anything off at all. He yawned again at the door. How could there possibly be an alpha living like this? I raised a hand to cover my face and let out a heavy sigh. I seriously can't believe this. I grabbed Adrien by the shoulders, turned him around and reached up to fix his buttons for him. "Weren't you pretty put together at the office last time?" I asked. "Are you doing this on purpose just to give me more work?" Adrien tilted his head. "No. I usually tidy up in the cafe restroom while I'm waiting for my coffee. Right now I'm just," he yawned, "too sleepy." Maybe he really wasn't fully awake. His pheromones kept leaking out. Even though he was clearly trying to rein them in, some still spilled from his glands. After these past few days, the pheromones of mine on him had faded a lot, so faint they were almost impossible to detect. For no clear reason, my mood soured. My movements as I fixed his clothes grew rougher. Adrien was tugged this way and that by me, yet he didn't get angry at all. Instead, he even had the leisure to comment, "Enigmas really are strong." When I finished straightening the last button, Adrien suddenly reached out, pinched my chin, and kissed me once. His lips were soft and warm. His pheromones clung to my skin at the point of contact. Thanks, he said lightly. Let's go now. I still want to grab a coffee. I'm so sleepy. With that, Adrien walked out the door, leaving me standing alone in the entryway. The pheromones I'd finally managed to calm down surged again. A sharp ache spread through my glands as the pheromones I'd been suppressing for so long churned violently. An Enigma without a partner needs to go to the hospital periodically to release pheromones. If they're allowed to build up for too long without release, they don't just damage the glands, they also erode an Enigma's rationality, turning them into creatures that act purely on instinct. But I'd clearly released mine on Adrien not that long ago. I pulled an inhibitor from my pocket. The needle pierced my skin. The cold liquid flowed through my veins, slowly smoothing out the burning heat. It took a long while before I finally moved, stepping in the direction Adrien had left. After getting his coffee, Adrien seemed much more awake. He caught the restless pheromones swirling inside the car. "Are you about to enter your sensitive phase?" he asked. I didn't answer. Adrien didn't press the issue and continued on his own. How do Enigmas usually deal with their sensitive phase? With an alpha or an omega? My grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What about you?" I shot back. "When you go into a sensitive phase, how do you handle it? Pick one at random from that group of omegas." The image of Adrien entangled with different omegas flashed through my mind, and an inexplicable anger flared up in my chest. My pheromones spilled out uncontrollably. Suppressed by the sudden pressure, Adrien couldn't even keep drinking his coffee. Knowing full well he couldn't overpower an Enigma's pheromones, he simply released his own in a conciliatory gesture. "No," he said calmly. "I usually rely on inhibitors." I paused. "Inhibitors? Aren't there always plenty of omegas around you?" I asked. Adrien shrugged. "Having omegas around doesn't mean I have to sleep with them. I only get close to them to look for pheromones that are truly compatible with mine." Before I could stop myself, the corner of my mouth lifted slightly. "Alphas, omegas, even enigmas, when it comes down to it, we're all just animals ruled by pheromones," Adrien said. "That's why I want to find the pheromones that fit me best. People online call it, what was it again?" He thought for a moment. "A fated match? I feel like your pheromones and mine are compatible, probably over 90%. But you don't need to feel pressured," he added. "If you don't want it, I won't force you." The car came to a stop downstairs at Adrien's company. He put on his glasses. That cool, restrained, almost ascetic aura snapped right back into place, and I couldn't stop myself from glancing at him again and again. Adrien's fingers rested on the car door. But instead of opening it, he turned to look at me. This would be my first time. You really don't need to tell me things like that." Adrien's mouth drooped slightly, disappointment flickering across his face. "I thought you'd be excited." After Adrien got out of the car, the pheromone concentration inside slowly began to rise. The pain radiating from my glands was almost unbearable. Resting my forehead against the steering wheel, I stared downward and let out a deep sigh. Of course, it wasn't only my glands that hurt. All morning, I spent most of my time trying to calm my pheromones. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket. It was Adrien. He occasionally messaged me during his lunch break. "I have a question. If an Enigma and an Alpha get together, who's usually on top? The Alpha or the Enigma?" I licked my dry lips. My mind was filled with the image of Adrien's lean waist hidden beneath fabric, his toned, springy muscles. I replied, "I don't know." Adrien didn't respond again. The dull ache in my glands returned. Each wave of pain felt stronger than the last, blurring my rationality. Affected by my pheromones, a colleague covered his mouth and nose and fled the smoking room as if escaping. I pulled out a spare inhibitor and injected it into myself. The last time this had happened was back when I was still in school. I'd entered my differentiation phase without any warning. The uncontrollable Enigma pheromones had sent many omegas and alphas into early sensitive phases. It took me a long time to learn how to control my pheromones. The hospital became a weekly checkpoint. I carried inhibitors in my bag 5 at a time. Fortunately, after my differentiation period ended, that kind of loss of control never happened again. But now, half an hour passed, and the effect was minimal. I let out a quiet sigh. That afternoon, I went to the hospital. The doctor in charge of my case was already waiting in the consultation room, fully dressed in pheromone-blocking gear. "You can't keep using medication the way you used to," he said. His hand pressed against my gland, applying slight pressure. "You've developed drug resistance. The dose that used to take 3 shots now requires at least 8. If this continues, it'll damage your glands. Go to the isolation room first and release some pheromones. 30 minutes later, I came out of the isolation room. A needle pierced into my forearm. The faint sting helped clear my head a little. What should I do from now on? I asked. The doctor thought for a moment. How about trying to date someone? Instantly, Adrien's face appeared in my mind. I arrived downstairs at Adrien's company just before he got off work. The moment he got into the car, a faint trace of his pheromones spread through the space. Mixed in with his scent were the lingering traces of various Omega's pheromones. Some strong, some faint. Enough to make me frown repeatedly. Adrien put his glasses away and reached up to tug at the tie in front of his collar. After just a few pulls, his collar fell open wide. He let out a breath, like he was finally catching his stride again. My nostrils flared slightly. Before I realized it, I'd leaned closer to him. Adrien noticed my small movement almost immediately. The corner of his lips curved up as he reached out and pressed a hand to the back of my head. With a light push, he pulled my face against his chest. "If you want to smell me, just do it," he said. "Why sneak around like that?" As he spoke, he released a surge of pheromones. The agitation in my chest gradually eased. When I spoke again, my voice had turned hoarse. "Do you do this with other people too?" Your pheromones," I clarified. "When someone else needs them, are you like this with them too?" "Of course not." Adrien smiled lazily. "Only for you." It didn't take long after taking off his glasses for Adrien to revert to his true nature. "Marcus," he said lazily, "how about I keep you? You can just stay home every day and wait for me to get off work. And Enigma's pheromones smell way too good. I feel like I'm about to enter my sensitive phase. Did you see that?" he added. My reaction. "Oh, so you're reacting too?" I shot Adrien a sideways glance. "Shut up." If he kept talking, neither of us was going to make it home. Adrien never went to bars again, but his popularity with Omegas didn't fade at all. Every single day, there were different Omegas gathered around him. I stood at a distance, watching them. Adrien kept a proper distance from the Omegas. No matter what they asked, he always responded with a smile, his tone gentle and patient. Some of the Omegas were on the shorter side. He would even bend down slightly to hear them more clearly. I could more or less understand why Adrien was so popular with Omegas. By the time he walked over to me, the Omegas around him still hadn't dispersed. Waves of floral and fruity sweetness washed over me, making my brow crease. The emotions embedded in those pheromones were painfully obvious. Affection, temptation, invitation. Aside from the time I'd suppressed Adrien before, this was the first time I used my pheromones to drive others away. The color drained from several Omegas' faces almost instantly. After saying goodbye to Adrien, they left in a hurry. Adrien explained softly, "I didn't do anything." "Don't worry," he added. "Right now, I'm only thinking about you." I immediately caught the word that made me uncomfortable. Right now? Did that mean he wouldn't later? Adrien didn't seem to realize there was anything wrong with what he'd said. He kicked off his shoes and casually propped one leg up against the edge of the seat. That unpleasant feeling only grew stronger, spreading alongside an odd tightness in my chest. It lasted for more than half an hour. I ground my back teeth together. Noticing something was off, Adrien turned to me. "What's wrong?" "Right now?" I said, only 2 words. Adrien thought for a moment, then suddenly understood. "Forever," he said quickly. "Forever and ever." He released soothing pheromones, intertwining them with mine. The aching in my glands gradually eased, and an unbelievable thought surfaced in my mind. On the screen was a message from Adrien. "Company dinner tonight. No need to pick me up." It was the first time Adrien had told me to just go home after work. I didn't think much of it and drove back on my own. Time ticked by, minute after minute. My phone stayed silent, nothing in the notification bar except ads. My mood grew increasingly restless. Every few seconds, I checked my phone again. After that one message, Adrien never contacted me again. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration. At 9 p.m., I finally couldn't hold back anymore and sent him a message. "Are you done eating? Do you need me to take you home?" No reply. At 10:30, I put on my clothes and went out. Not knowing where Adrien was, the only thing I could do was wait downstairs at his apartment building. At midnight, a few figures appeared in the distance. As they drew closer, their faces gradually came into focus. 3 people. I took a breath and caught their scents. Besides Adrien, there was 1 Alpha and 1 Omega. I stepped forward, blocking them, and directly took the dead-drunk Adrien from their hands. A choking wave of alcohol hit me head-on, mixed with unfamiliar omega pheromones. It was nauseating. Under that chaotic blend of scents, my rationality began to fray. "Thanks," I said stiffly. "I'll take him upstairs." My pheromones leaked out despite my efforts to restrain them. The alpha standing in front instinctively took a step back. "You're Adrien's friend, right?" he said. "Then we'll leave him to you. He drank a bit too much tonight." The omega was clearly interested in Adrien. Even under the pressure of my pheromones, he still tried to stay. Maybe I should stay and help take care of him," he said hesitantly. "You might have trouble managing on your own." I lifted Adrien with one arm, casually straightening the hem of his rumpled clothes as I did. Only then did I turn my gaze to the omega. "Sorry," I said calmly. "What was that you said?" The omega opened his mouth, then closed it again, finally shaking his head. "Nothing. Sorry to trouble you." Adrien was thrown onto the bed. The clothes that were already loose slid straight down his side from the impact. My mark had long since faded. There wasn't a trace of it left. Looking at Adrien drunk like this, the anger in me only burned hotter. I leaned down, bracing both hands on either side of him. My pheromones poured out, completely enveloping him. The sharp pain in his glands dragged him out of sleep. He opened his eyes and met my gaze. "So this is the company dinner you were talking about? A dinner full of omegas? You just said forever the other day. And after a couple of meals, you already forgot?" Adrien gradually sobered under the pressure of my pheromones. After enduring that needle-like pain, a long mist sensation spread through his limbs. Adrien looked satisfied. There wasn't a trace of urgency in him. With alcohol and Enigma pheromones working together, even his explanation came slow and lazy. "I didn't know at first," he said. "I only realized after I got there that they'd invited a lot of omegas." Watching him grin shamelessly, my mood sank even further. "If I hadn't shown up tonight," I asked, "would that omega have stayed over at your place?" Adrien hesitated, for just a moment. That single moment was enough to shatter what little restraint I had left. My pheromones spiraled out of control, flooding every inch of him. I tore away the fabric covering his body, wiping away every lingering trace of omega scent from him, one by one. Under the overwhelming surge of pheromones, Adrien was stimulated into entering his sensitive phase early. Pheromones spilled from his body, alpha instincts urging him again and again to seize the person he desired right in front of him. I lost focus for just a moment, and Adrien flipped me beneath him. He gripped my wrist tightly. His breathing was ragged and heavy, every place where we touched burning hot. I tried to struggle free. I couldn't. Sure enough, no matter how gentle Adrien's pheromones usually were, no matter how foolish he acted, he was still an alpha through and through. As natural leaders and dominators, very few alphas would ever willingly submit to someone else. Adrien leaned down and bit into me. "Both Enigmas and alphas are dominators," he murmured. "So it's not impossible for the alpha to be on top, right?" As he spoke, his hand moved. "I'll be gentle." I laughed out loud, my voice trembling. The next second, Adrien was thrown back onto the bed. Scorching heat pressed against his gland. I grabbed his waist and gave it a squeeze. "With a waist like this," I said softly, "who do you think you're pinning down?" Before the words had fully fallen, my canines pierced his skin. An Enigma's mark was branded into Adrien's gland, permanent and unerasable. Adrien went completely silent. His eyes lost focus. The hand clutching the sheets slowly going slack. Gradually his pheromones faded, drifting weakly around me. He lifted a trembling fist and slowly opened it in front of me. His palm was damp, carrying a thick scent, purely Adrien's pheromones. Enigmas are even more intense than what people say online. Because of you, I entered my sensitive phase early. You have to take responsibility. At first, I didn't dare use too much force, until Adrien said, "Don't you know how tough alphas are?" From that moment on, there was no stopping. I marked Adrien over and over again. At the beginning, he could still run his mouth and provoke me a few times. Later, all that was left was the sound of his breathing. When I woke up the next day, it was already noon. Adrien was still asleep, his back turned toward me, his body mottled with bruises. Everywhere I looked were traces left behind by my loss of control the night before. I rubbed my forehead in frustration, my fingers sliding past my ear to rest on my gland. It was calm. The agitation and discomfort from the past few days had completely vanished. Adrien turned over, draping an arm across me. He cracked his eyes open, his voice still hazy with sleep. Enigmas are really something. I didn't get pinned down for nothing. That felt way too good. He leaned in, rubbing his face against me. Never thought I'd see the day. Good to look at, good to touch, and actually useful too. I grabbed his wrist and warned him in a low voice, "Don't." Adrien laughed. "Don't underestimate an alpha's stamina." He propped himself up and openly invited me. "Want to go again?" Extra. I was the one who confessed first, before Adrien ever did. Adrien stared straight at my suit. "I don't think I've ever really seen you in formal wear before." I have some at the office. I usually only change when I need to." Seeing him practically glued to me with his eyes, I deliberately teased him. "You like it?" I asked. "Should I keep it on tonight?" Adrien nodded without a shred of dignity left. He grabbed me, his steps hurried. "Then let's go back now." "Wait, I haven't finished confessing yet." Seeing the carefully arranged venue disappear around the corner, I hurriedly stopped him. Adrien snatched the ring from my hand and slipped it onto his own finger. "I accept," he said, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. "All right, let's go. Hurry." Watching his anxious, retreating figure, I couldn't stop the corner of my mouth from lifting. "Honestly, you're 3 years older than me. How are you still so—" Adrien didn't hear a word, still charging forward. I sped up and scooped him up around the waist. "Look how impatient you are," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." Adrien laughed. "If you don't hurry up, I might just take off." At that, I moved even faster than he had. The end.